It's 2.3. By the end of the show, I'm guessing it's going to be 2.5 million people signing a petition to oppose digital ID cards. We just spoke to Ross Clark about it, and talking about, these aren't going to stop the small boat migrants getting a job. This is just abject nonsense. It's embarrassing. But there are just so many more concerns about these cards that make them different from having a passport, having a credit card, having an NHS app to renew your prescriptions. Why is it different? Why are the people like me who are worried about it not, we're not conspiracy theorists?
For the first time in our lifetimes, there is going to be somewhere, not entirely sure where, but probably provided by some private company that's paid for the research that's led to this, a database in which a file is kept on you. And the Julia Hartley-Brewer file will say what she was doing in 2005 and whether or not perhaps she wore a mask during COVID. And they may even go into your old file from when, during the pandemic, the government spy agency kept tabs on what you were tweeting and
sent it to a counter-terrorism unit in the United States. Nothing to see here, people. Nothing to see here.
And put it all into that one little repository, and then they're going to use that data to make decisions about, for example, whether or not you get a council house, or whether or not you get seen by a GP today, or whether or not you're a good person or a bad person.
No, hold on a minute. I can imagine people listening here going, that's a load of nonsense. Why? And there's no one's talking about doing that. Well, that's a conspiracy theory.
The infrastructure that they are building takes us from something. We already have a national insurance number that identifies you as a British person. We already have passports.
Able to work, yeah.
We already have driving licenses. This is something different. What is the difference between a driving licence, a passport, a national insurance number, and this? What it is there will be one centralised computer system. And sure, maybe, day one, it will just have these little files attached to it. But do we really think that governments that love to keep tabs on people, that love data, think they can make everything, the more they know about us, the better they can keep control of us? Do we honestly think that is where it's going to stop?
Exactly.
And that's what I worry about.
And it won't necessarily be in the case of a pandemic or a war. I mean, many people are predicting, anyone paying attention knows that one or both of those are going to happen again, probably in my lifetime, probably much sooner. I mean, and that's the thing. Think about it. It's like when you get a passport or that's a moment in time, and it's proof. I think it's absolutely right. I should be able to prove who I am and what my nationality is going in and out of the country, or prove I've passed a test to drive. This is something that could be used. A, it's live, it's constant, it's updated constantly. B, it's got all your information in one place, which is supposed to be the selling point. But actually, having had my bag stolen a year ago, I can see why that would be a particular issue. If someone had access to your phone and could see all this stuff. But also the hacking risk, just from the nefarious actors. Given that the banks and Marks and Sparks can't protect their own data, the MOD can't protect their own data, I'm not entirely sure I'm going to trust them to protect mine. But so you've got that side of things. But the control aspect is the bit that most terrifies me. We've seen what's happened in China. It's very, very, very clear. And most people think, if you tell people about this, they think you're talking about some silly science fiction, dystopian Hollywood film. It is the case in China that you are constantly monitored and tracked.
You get a score.
You have your social credit score. If you do something, either committing a crime, okay, you might want to, great, it will deter people from committing crime. But some of the crimes, remember, write a tweet or say something critical, or maybe complain to your school because they brought another cross-dresser in and said it's about trans rights, yeah? Oh, we'll all be on that list, guys. So you lose your social credit for that, and at some point when you lose enough social credit, you can't buy things. You're not allowed to get a train ticket or buy a plane ticket. You're not allowed to attend a concert. You're not allowed to... why would they not include... for a disease which barely had any impact on people under the age of 70... They were excluding kids from school, youngsters from university, most of us from our jobs. You think, and they were going to try to stop us from going to watch a football match or going to the pub. You seriously think they wouldn't do that again? This is the thing I find extraordinary. To say that this is a conspiracy theory. It actually happened during they tried to do it. What happened to the truckers in Canada? When they just said we don't want to have vaccine passports to go to work. What's happened in New Zealand, in Australia, in terms of people, but also what is happening right now in China. this is not a dystopian science fiction future. It's in the here and now. It's happening already. Why do you think uniquely that our government is trustworthy when every government we've had today has proved itself to not be trustworthy?
There's also something very, very un-British about this proposal.
We're very different from European countries on this, aren't we?
They have had a papers, please country, but the UK has been different for two reasons. Firstly, because we're an island nation and people are not coming and going. And secondly, because broadly speaking, in the history of these islands, we have had a sense of community, a sense of locality, a sense of rootedness in our people, in which it meant we didn't need voter ID. Why? Because you knew who your neighbour was, and the person at your little polling station when you went to vote, my granny and my grandpa used to do it for years, they knew everybody. They'd cross their name off before they come in that village, and as a result, the policemen knew who the wrong uns were. People knew who each other were. And we got to have precious, valuable liberties, rights that our European cousins didn't have. But politicians have squandered that. They have squandered the trust that we have in one another, the familiarity, the sense of safety, such that they now turn around to us and they say, oh, well, everyone's feeling a bit dangerous, so now we need to keep tabs on you
But
instead.
also, again, this crucial relationship between the individual and the state, which is that, and it's like the American Constitution, we the people. I know we have a constitutional monarchy in that, but fundamentally, overstep your mark, you're out. We know that's how
it's happened in history.
And the monarchs know that. But at the end of the day, we're the people in charge. When people talked about returning sovereignty from the EU to Parliament, returning it to the British people, because we elect the MPs in Parliament. Ultimately, we are sovereign. And the rule is, in terms of criminal law, it's not like the government allows us to do things. No, we can do everything that is not expressly forbidden by law, and everything else we do is no one's business. A police officer cannot stop me and say, what are you doing? None of your sodding business. Unless you can tell me the crime you are suspecting me of, you don't have a right to stop me and ask for my information. And that is really important. And this whole idea that if you've got nothing to fear, you've got nothing to hide. No, sorry, I've never had an affair. I don't have any dodgy financial dealings. I haven't got a criminal record. I've not got, I haven't had health treatment I want anyone to know about. Not any of that. No, I have got nothing to fear in that sense, other than the fact it's none of the government's sodding business to know my personal details unless I choose to give them, or they're required by law, as yes, I'm required to pay taxes, so you need to know my income, and it's useful for me to be able to do my prescription online. I've got no problem with that, but I don't want anyone overseeing that and linking it to any other part of my life.
Yeah, and this comes as part of a pattern of other things as well. We know that the Bank of England is looking at introducing a central bank digital currency in which every transaction you make will be tracked, will be kept on a database. And look, I'll be honest, I don't trust this government. No. I don't trust the British government generally, which changes colours.
I wouldn't trust Reform or Tory or any government on this. I'm sorry, Tories prove themselves to be utterly untrustworthy.
We have some basic privacy that we're entitled to as people. We don't need the government to do it. We just want you to do your job, secure the borders, secure our freedoms, and get on with delivering.
Let's talk about secure government. One of the reasons, the reason that's been cited, so apart from that, it's all very convenient, and because Tony Blair had a quiet word and is set to make billions from it. And I'm sorry, Tony Blair, every solution to every problem is digital ID cards, and all his clients and all he's up to his neck in this. He really is. But Keir Starmer had a quiet word. He reckons that ID cards is what's needed to tackle illegal migration. We had a record 125 migrants arrive on British shores in a single boat.
Mega dinghy.
A mega dinghy. But digital ID cards are apparently the answer. Meanwhile, we're talking about legal migration, and that's been front page news with Keir Starmer yesterday calling reform's migrant policy racist and immoral. His claim being that, this idea that people who've come here and been promised a right to stay, that these are the part. He said they're part of the fabric of our society, but Nigel is outrageous to try and say you'd have to reapply and leave. Whereas the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood today is going to be announcing a policy, a good citizen test. So you basically, even if when you want settled status, you're going to have to prove your income. You're going to have to prove you made a contribution to society. I mean, it's like community. I'm sorry, if someone's paying millions in tax, I'm quite happy for them not to go and volunteer at the local library. Thank you very much. I'd rather they paid the tax and paid their way. I really think that's mad. But you have to not commit a crime and all the things. But this is basic bare minimum. That policy doesn't backdate, right? So that policy is okay, but Nigel Farage's policy is racist. Can you explain to me why that would be?
Keir Starmer is absolutely scrambling like a Prime Minister I have never seen before. He is the most unpopular British Prime Minister in history. Never been as unpopular.
Can we give him a round of applause? Come on. Well done, that Prime Minister.
It's nice to set a record for something.
No, exactly. He's good at something, being rubbish.
But look, this policy, the fact that this, for starters, the fact that you do not already have to prove that you're not a criminal, that you're making a contribution to society, that you're putting in more than you're taking out before we say to you, no, you get to stay here forever for the rest of your life after 5 years. I cannot understand why that's there. I do need to correct you on one thing, actually. This is also the case that if you've got asylum, if you've got asylum acceptance, after 5 years you just get the right to stay forever, no matter if the country where you came from continues to be dangerous. And we know, by the way, that some so-called Afghan refugees are going back on holiday to Afghanistan. That's the level to which they're taking the mickey out of us. No matter if you're making a contribution, no matter if nothing, you stay here for 5 years. That's it. It's like squatters' rights. You're here for good. We can never get rid of you. Bring your aunts, bring your uncles. Bob's your uncle. Probably Bob and quite a few other people are your uncles, because they're all claiming to be your uncles when they're coming over.
No DNA. You can't have DNA tests. That would be illegal.
And that is the extent to which our systems have been abused. And if you want to know why your high street looks different, if you want to know why your doctor takes 3 weeks to see you when it only used to take 1 week, if you want to know why you're earning less for the same job you've always done, that's the reason why. Because our systems have been weaponized by dangerous people at times, opportunistic people at other times, who have milked it for everything it's worth. And politicians, if they think that throwing names around like racist or anything else is going to work anymore, they've got another thing
and
coming.
It's not even that it doesn't work anymore, as in put people off it. It actually makes people more determined, because when good people are being told they're racist to a policy which, by the way, has no mention of race in it whatsoever, although statistically different countries do have very clear on average records of when they are. I mean, you know, it's really, really clear that there are some countries, I'm with you, there are some countries which go, I'm not sure, unless someone has got like a PhD.
It's a genuine brain surgeon.
No, a genuine brain surgeon has got a PhD. They've already got 3 multi-million-pound companies, and they're going to come here and create jobs. Unless you fit some of those rules, I'm pretty sure we don't necessarily need you to come and live in this country. I'm not sure you're going to be a net contributor. But this is a madness. I mean, I just find it extreme. But we've also got the issue, of course, we've had to import all these people, haven't we? Because A, it's improved our economy. Didn't do that. No. B, we needed them in NHS. No, we didn't need that. We could have just trained up people who had the grades and wanted to learn to be doctors and nurses. And B, because we haven't got these young people who won't work. We've got 1 in 8 young people in this country who are not their needs, not in education, employment or training. And I've been saying that statement, okay, the number varies, it goes up, it goes down. I've been talking about NEETs for about 15 years. These people are still... I do not understand why anyone finds it difficult to make sure that young people are doing something useful. They have no access to benefits, full stop. They're mum and dad's problem. And as we were discussing earlier, if your kid doesn't have a work ethic and doesn't have any qualifications because you are such a useless parent, that's going to be your problem, not ours. I'm sorry. I consider the job of a parent to be turn out a nice, law-abiding person who can have relationships, have friends, works hard at school, and some kids aren't academic. That's not the problem. I would rather my kid had a work ethic than straight A-levels, because a work ethic will get you further in life. And there's no excuse for any parent who's doing their job even vaguely properly to not turn out a kid who can go out and get a job and understands hard work, and whether it's bar work or cleaning the streets or cycling around. I mean, apparently there are loads of jobs delivering takeaways because all the illegal migrants are able to do those jobs. So I mean, it just seems to me blatantly obvious. So Rachel Reeves is saying it's really bad for young people to be out of work for a long time. So she's going to allow them to be out of work for 18 months. So a tenth of their life, they're going to be... that is... Not tenths, that's wrong maths, apologies. But that is mad. I mean, that's absolutely mad that they should be doing that. I mean, insane that they should be doing that. But I would say 3 months max. and then we are going to put you on workfare, and you're going to be cleaning the streets, and you're going to be doing something useful. Otherwise, mum and dad are going to have to pay for you. End of. I can solve this for you in 6 months.
When did we lose the idea that the welfare state was something you had to pay into before you got something back? You have to make a contribution in the good times so that there was a safety net in the bad times. That was how it was sold to the British public. That was how the system was built. That was how it was designed. And there are pensioners in this country that have paid in their entire lives and are struggling because it can be tough to survive on the state pension with all the stuff. And how insulting is it to them for an 18-year-old Wally or worse to be sat around drinking cider, smoking cannabis, playing his Xbox on the rock and roll already? It is not good for that person. It is unfair for everybody else. And I think we all know there are people in our local area that we've met, we've seen, we're aware of who they are, that are swinging the lead. And it is not fair. It is not fair for the rest of us. And it's about
It's not fair on them as well.
It's not fair on them. And it's about time, actually, as a society, we got back to the idea that we just said to people, no, hang on, shame on you. That is shameful to sit around all day in your front garden, drinking and showering and causing a mess.
That's what the only reason I work is so I don't spend all day doing that. I would be doing that.
And look,
I'm having a great time.
I accept that the biggest problem in our country right now is migration and the way that they are taking the mick. But I have seen this trend.
But if employers couldn't employ people illegally like that, or couldn't employ people on cheap rates because we've got mass immigration, they would have to trade up these young people. They wouldn't have an excuse. There would be jobs, and when they're hungry enough, they will do the work.
But I have seen this trend, and Julia, you and I know we've had phone calls on this topic before, when people go and they say, look, the migrants are coming over here, they're taking for all of this, why shouldn't I get what I possibly can get? And I'd say to anybody listening, maybe they know somebody like this, maybe they thought about it themselves, don't let them bring us down to that level. The fact that people are breaking into this country illegally doesn't mean that we have to go and nick money off people that are working, that are trying hard, in order for us to just sit around cushy at home, because it's not right. That's not the British way, and we should be better than that.
Absolutely. Hear to all of that.
Hello, Julia. Hello. How are you?
Very well. I'm really well, because I'm not at Labour Party conference. I am an equal opportunity hater of party conferences. It's all of them.
Well, we're missing you, obviously, and you're very welcome any time.
I often find I'm not getting a very friendly reception at Labour Party conference. I don't know why, though.
I can't believe that to be true, but anyway, we'll see. I mean, you can see me behind me. The delegates are going in to watch some of the speeches. I've just seen several cabinet ministers flowing past me, so we're all here, and you're not, which is
having a fabulous time. They probably would think I was racist because I'm really a big fan of Reform's migrant policy. The Prime Minister, though, says it's racist and immoral, the policy. But at the same time, the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, is going to be announcing their good citizen test for the government for a settled status. So it's almost, as far as I can tell, identical to Reform's policy. It's just not going to apply to people who've already got settled status. It's not going to be backdated. So why is one policy racist and immoral and the other isn't?
I was listening to your discussion on this earlier with the callers, and I think it's actually a mistake to just shout racist at people that you don't agree with. Far more effective, I would say, is to look at the actual policies that are being proposed by Reform UK and by the Labour government and work out which ones are more likely to be successful and work. And the fact is that the Reform UK policy crumbled under scrutiny within about an hour of it being announced.
Did it?
It was based on figures that didn't add up, that had been, well, the figures it was based on for savings were repudiated by the very think tank
these were
that
estimates from CPS
so
based on OBR reports, but OBR have rejudged them. That doesn't mean it's crumbled.
Said the numbers were wrong.
No, I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't care if it says 10 billion quid or 300 billion quid.
Within minutes.
The policy didn't crumble.
But
the
Julia,
exact no, Paul. The policy didn't crumble. It's not based on it'll only work if it's this exact saving. That's a nonsense.
No, because if you're pretending to be the Prime Minister, if you're claiming to be the next
You mean like Keir
government,
Starmer?
you can't launch your flagship. You can't launch your flagship policy based on numbers that simply don't add up. And
Well,
you know,
your
a small
party
child
did.
looking at the numbers could immediately tell you that they wouldn't add up, and the whole thing crumbled within about an hour.
It didn't.
So
it
I
didn't.
don't think it's about
but it, no, but it
shouting
did. No,
names
it's
and
just a
insults.
nonsense.
I think you're
Paul.
saying, what about
It
the
didn't.
substance?
The
Well, it was a
substance
nonsense.
is
Yeah, the policy was
the
absolute
substance is
nonsense.
you
So this
don't.
is their big announcement.
No,
and it was
the
rubbish.
substance is whether it's a 10 billion or 20 billion difference in saving long term. I don't think the British public even care. What they want is a policy. Whoever delivers it, which is why Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, Labour Party Home Secretary, is delivering. Well, promising to deliver, whether it actually happens, a similar policy, is that they don't think that anyone who, Tom, Dick or Harry, who turns up here should be allowed to stay if they're not a net contributor. Why is it racist if Reform do it, but it's not if Labour do it?
What's wrong with that? That sounds like a very positive
But that's
idea
Reform's
to me. There's quite a
policy.
buzz around that here at conference.
That's
because
Reform's policy.
People are, except Reform. Well, lots of ideas flowing into the Labour government, but we are the government, and Reform have 5 MPs, and we have rather
They're
more
also
than that.
way
so,
ahead of the polls.
We are forming legislation. Well, polls are a snapshot, as you well know. Different parties lead at different points, and that doesn't predict the election.
Since when was the Labour Party? When was the Labour Party last in front in the polls?
I've no idea. Probably
Exactly.
just before the election, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
And which we went on to win with a massive majority.
Why is there a question mark over whether Keir Starmer is even going to make it to next year's party conference with Andy Burnham, the sort of the king over the water, wandering around?
There's no question mark. Well, Andy Burnham arrived. He was met by a huge crowd of people egging him on to stand for the leader. But unfortunately, Julia, they're all journalists. They're the only people that are playing this up. And I think Mr. Burnham needs to do the excellent job he's doing in Manchester and carry on doing that. But the delegates here are united behind the Prime Minister.
No, they're not. The polling shows
Manchester.
very different.
No.
That Labour people are
not.
very much
anyone
looking.
here.
Polling repeatedly shows that Labour Party members and indeed a lot of Labour MPs are telling journalists that they want him gone. He's not up to the job.
Absolutely not. Andy Burnham has completely overshot on this. He's played his hand, and there's no mechanism for him to even become.
This is true.
I mean, he's not an MP. Let's forget. He's got the same chance as you of becoming Prime Minister right now, because as Mayor of Manchester doesn't give you a shoe-in to become Prime Minister.
At least he's a member of the party. That might be an extra shoe-in. But I mean, all I'm just saying is, there's a reason why he thinks there is a shot worth making, isn't there? I mean, we've got a Prime Minister who's not even quite 15 months into the job, and there's question marks about his future, and he's throwing out mad policies like ID cards. Can you explain to me, because he failed to explain to Laura Kunsberg yesterday in an interview, how me having a digital ID card on my phone that tracks me constantly and knows everything about me and is updated in real time and could perhaps prevent me getting a job or buying something if I haven't got my vaccines up to date in the event of a next pandemic. How does that put illegal migrants
that's
off from
quite a
coming
big leap
here?
of imagination, isn't it? Where's that come from? Vaccines? Where's that come from? That's a big leap of imagination. The announcement has been
literally
around
what it
right
can
to
be
work
used
and your
for.
NI number.
No, that's not what it'll have on it.
Only in your dystopic view of the world.
Well, pretty much every ID system has been used.
I think the ID cards is a really interesting policy because it's good. It's a good policy. I think we should all have an ID on our phone. We've all got smartphones. Good idea. But also it's annoying all the right people. There was a crowd outside, campaigning against ID, and they were saying that 5G was giving you cancer, and they were saying that climate change was a hoax, and it's annoyed all the right people, this policy. And you look at its opponents, and then look at the people who actually support it. It is another tool.
So the good people support it. Paul,
but more importantly, it's just a sign of citizen.
2.3 million people have already signed a petition against this ID. This is not the same as...
4 million people, Julia. 4 million voted for reform. 4 million people voted Reform UK, and not even all of them have signed the petition.
What's that got to do with anything?
A mass uprising, is it?
I think 2.3 million people in 3 days signing a petition
members oppose No.
I'm pretty sure the Reform
Absolutely not.
UK members can make up their own mind. There'll be plenty of Labour members. It's not a stretch of the imagination.
I'm merely pointing out that is not a lot in
Okay.
terms of a population of 60
It's not a stretch of the
and the polling shows
imagination.
support for it.
It's not a stretch of the imagination about what digital ID. I've got a driving licence, I've got an NHS app, I've got a passport, I've got a national insurance number. The government and any employer doesn't need any more information on me.
So why do you care?
Why do I care? Because I saw what happened during COVID.
Why you've got all of that on your phone already?
Paul,
so
because
what?
it's not a.
It's just a very natural step.
Paul,
it's a very
no,
easy
it's not.
thing to do.
It's
and
not
every citizen will have one.
Paul, it's not tracked in real time, and we've seen what's happened in China with social credits. We saw what happened in Canada. We saw what happened with vaccine passports
we
here.
are not China.
Well, no, we thought that before COVID, didn't we? We're not China. And then people were banned. And then Labour was calling for people to be banned from going to work if they didn't have a vaccine. But we're definitely nothing to worry about, Paul. Nothing to worry about. No.
It's nothing to do with vaccines. It's nothing to do with COVID. It's to do with the right to work and having all the data on a phone that we have in our pockets already, but in one single place. It's quite convenient. It's quite useful. You have to show ID when you pick up a vintage parcel, so why not?
It's really, it's not in real time. It's not constantly changing and updating, and it doesn't track. Very, very different. With all due respect, I don't think you understand what this ID app would actually mean. So here's the thing. How does that stop someone who wants to come on an illegal dinghy, and we had 125 on one mega dinghy alone at the weekend, how does that stop them from getting work? Are you convinced that the employers right now who happily take on someone who doesn't speak English, doesn't have a passport, doesn't have a national insurance number, paying them off the books a quarter or whatever of the minimum wage, that they're suddenly going to go, oh, but now I must ask for your digital ID? Really?
I think it's another tool in the kit that can help with that and cracking down on those rogue employers and exploitative bosses. I mean, it's another way to do it.
You can do that. You can crack down on them already.
People will try and get around it, as they do with every system and every regulation and every law. It's not the magic bullet, but it is a very important step forward.
Tell me which employer.
The people that shout loudest about the small boats are now the same people complaining about digital ID.
No, because digital ID won't stop the small boat. Paul, do you think there are employers who don't ask for national insurance or passport or visa proof of work right now who will suddenly start doing it because of digital ID? How you deal with that is you prosecute very hard and very regularly employers. Why does it make it harder?
Well, it will make it harder because there is a single, simple way to check somebody's identity.
No, that doesn't make it harder.
The police and the other authorities crack down on those
you've either got
it's
a passport,
not the only way,
or you've
but it's one of the ways.
No, you've either got a passport, national insurance number that can be checked, or you don't. It's a 5-minute job. I've got an 18-year-old who just got a job, doing bar work. She had to produce her passport and a national insurance number. There you go. Yeah. So there's nothing stopping employers doing that right now.
It'll be another way to crack down on those rogue employers. But it won't. And also it means everyone is a citizen, so we all have the same,
Everyone is a citizen. No, only
ID card.
No.
You don't have to carry it. You won't have to show it to the police.
Everyone isn't a citizen.
It's not like sort of post-war movies with the Stasi on the streets. It's just simply a way of saying, yeah, I am a citizen. Here's my data for getting a job.
I can already
it's all on one place. And
I can already do that.
Nice and simple and easy.
I can already do that, and so can every British citizen in this country. So why does that stop an illegal migrant from working?
It's another tool in stopping that.
Okay, and how does that tool work?
In illegal working, as well as more police resources, more intelligence, breaking up the business models, fining and sending to prison those rogue bosses. It's just another way of busting that up. And don't be so cynical, because it's just another way to achieve the goal that we all want, which is stopping the boats and stopping the rogue employers.
Not going to work, Paul.
This is another way to do it.
I'm a conspiracy theorist.
How do you know it's not going to work?
Cynical. Because I'm living the real world.
It works in Estonia, it works in Denmark, it works in all kinds of other countries that have digital ID. Estonia is a fantastic example of this.
And how does this stop illegal migrants who want to come to Britain?
I don't
think Estonia's got a massive issue with people wanting to come to Estonia to work. There may be other pull factors.
But that's seeing it But you're seeing it purely through the lens of small boats. What I'm saying is that it's a way for all citizens to access the labour
I can already
market
do
and
that.
have a single
I can already
ID
do
for
that.
all of us on our phones.
So it won't be compulsory
well, then
then?
you've nothing to worry about.
So it won't be compulsory then?
Nothing to worry about.
No, so it won't be compulsory.
Well, we'll all have
then?
it on the phone, but you won't have to. You won't have to
Is it
carry
compulsory or isn't it compulsory?
But we'll all have it.
No, I don't want it on my
like an NI
phone.
number, it will be compulsory.
But so I will
like
have
an
to.
NI number.
So you don't have
Everyone
to
has
have
one
it,
of
but
them
you
too.
will have to have
or
it.
an NHS number.
Oh, Paul.
You won't have to show it to the police, though, in the street.
Won't I?
And don't forget, the legislation hasn't even gone through yet. We don't know what the detail is because MPs haven't debated it yet.
And how many billion...
We haven't even had a green paper or a white paper.
No, exactly. And it's not going to go through by the end of the Parliament's promise. And how many billions will it cost? Any idea?
We don't know until we start the legislative process, do we? You used to be a lobby correspondent. You know full well how Parliament works. You can't cost it till you start designing it.
No, actually, quite the opposite. The idea is if you think a policy is good, you should only know that based on the cost. You think the reforms migrant policy falls down because it may or may not be 10 billion quid out on savings. But yeah, let's just spend a fortune on an ID system that won't make a difference.
Julia.
Thank you. George. So I assumed you just dozed off after starting speaking because you were watching a bit of Rachel Reeves' speech on the sidebar on the TV.
Oh, she is actually she's delivered perhaps the most powerful point of her speech, which was to stand up to some hecklers who were taking her on the Palestinian issue. And I think commentary is already saying that might be the strongest bit of her speech.
Well, we know that the Home Secretary, what is she this week? Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper, she has already said that the Palestinian state is an inalienable right of the Palestinian people. I mean, I'm just surprised they aren't just all waving Palestinian flags all week. But there we are. You say heckled by Palestinian protesters. She said, "We understand your cause." Someone was shouting, Israel is committing genocide. They're not. Chancellor said, we understand your cause and we understand your cause and we're recognising a Palestinian state. I can't keep up, it hurts. But we are now a party of government, not a party of protest. And then, she just carried on. But anyway, let's talk about what she and the Prime Minister are saying. Because in particular, I want to read to you a statement that Starmer put out on Twitter this weekend saying, it's national division or it's national renewal. That's the fight we face. What on earth do you think he meant by that?
Here's an interesting thing about Keir Starmer. Lots of the language that he's used in the last year since becoming Prime Minister has actually been quite convoluted. It's not been very specific. It ranges around. It's very hard to nail him down. And in fact, I think the Sunday Times did a big piece on this yesterday about analysing the language that he uses. It's a problem for him. It's a problem for the Labour Party. It's a problem for the government because communications is so critical that if you can't nail somebody down and be very, very clear about what your vision is, then it's hard to pull people with you. Now, of course, he might argue that being broad and general allows him to keep as many people in a loose coalition together as possible, which, of course, is the other trick in modern politics today. But what it means is we end up, as you say yourself, what does he mean? And that's a big problem for him and the people around him.
Yeah, I mean, no one knows what he stands for. No one knows what he's saying, even when he's just said it. He doesn't answer questions. I mean, he's an absolute disaster. We see this. He's the most unpopular Prime Minister since records began, basically. I mean, that's quite a feat after just 14 and a bit months. We've also got, Andy Burnham wandering around conferences, the king over the water. Eventually just down from Manchester to Liverpool. I mean, it's extraordinary that he's wandering around being thought of as the next leader and that's even being discussed. I mean, you and I remember, we were both working in the House of Commons together as lobby correspondents when Tony Blair had just got into power. The idea that in 1998, a few months into, to the summer of that, there would have been a conversation about Tony Blair facing a challenge to his leadership is laughable. So why is it happening to Keir Starmer?
There are reasons, one of which is if you come into politics just trying to hold on to little majorities here and there, then, of course, in the end, you'll be blown off course by events. And the other thing I think is, we live in a different era than the one when you and I were working together. The era of social media and constant commentary makes it much, much harder to lead because you're always trying to square off different groups of people who might be offended or upset. And the reality is, if you look at somebody who's a very strong leader and takes direction, it's because because they don't really care about what's going to happen to them in the polls. And that's the dilemma we have in all Western representative democracy now.
Yeah, and it is niche. But then you think about someone like Margaret Thatcher, who just like, yeah, I don't care if this or that policy is unpopular. I'm going to say it because it's true. Or I'm going to do it because it's true. And Keir Starmer seems to be constantly worrying about that, apart from when he's talking about reform, when he constantly talks about race. I mean, he had to sort of correct himself. You know, I'm not saying, you know, he doesn't say that Nigel Farage is racist. You know, you'd think he'd be sued to his backside. He might lose his donkey field to that. But he, you know, he doesn't say that Reform voters are racist. Although, you know, if you carry your flag and you protest against things, you might be a bigot or racist. But he says that Reform's policy, their migrant policy in particular, in relation to those who come here legally but aren't net contributors and aren't really joining, you know, integrating in society, and that they should have to reapply, and that they shouldn't get indefinite leave to remain, even if they've already been given it, and should be deported. He says that's a racist policy, and immoral even. But today, Shabana Mahmood, his own Home Secretary, is announcing a policy which, other than the backdating, seems to me to be pretty much the same policy. What do you make of that?
Of course, this is all about trying to speak to different audiences, and that's how you end up with confusion. And of course, not only that, Rachel Reeves has already sort of stood behind Keir Starmer's comments using the racist language herself. She said this morning that she feels the same way. Yeah. And of course, there are a lot of people in the Labour Party, and don't forget they're at the Labour conference right now, so all their delegates are around them. That's what they feel too, and they applaud that kind of language, and they absolutely agree with it. So do the trade unions, and so do the Labour members.
But and that's fine getting applause from that lot, but that lot are going to vote for you anyway. And on the current polling, an awful lot of people who've gone over to Reform, he's not going to win them back by basically saying, you support a racist policy. Because if you support a racist policy, you know what that makes you? Wink, wink, a racist.
Well, here's the thing, Julia. It's not exactly as you put it, because the reality is the people in the hall, the people in the constituency parties, the trade unions, may not vote for Keir Starmer in a leadership election, should it come up, or any of the other people. And that's what they're actually worried about right now, is staying in power as this crisis begins to engulf them. And that's why they're making these comments. In a sense, they're not really trying to worry about outside the Liverpool conference. They're much more worried about their own survival, as you say. Yeah. They have Andy Burnham, they have others circling around because they feel that the Prime Minister may be wounded. So the Prime Minister has to look at his own audience, his immediate audience right now. Because when all this is happening, you think to yourself, who is running the country and what are they focusing on?
Yeah, and I think we can safely say they don't have a clue. In that sense, we saw on Friday this sort of desperate sort of, we can't, you know, we can't deal with illegal migration. Bearing in mind we had even just one single boat on the weekend that had a record 125 migrants in this mega dinghy. That is going to be a big worry. 1,000 arriving over the weekend. And we've talked about legal migration and how we deal with, you know, people who stay who aren't contributing. But in illegal migration, he just plucked out of thin air the idea that we should have digital ID. We should all have apps on our phone, and that somehow would stop the pull of illegal work for illegal migrants. I mean, asked repeatedly by Laura Kunsberg yesterday, he couldn't explain why that would actually make a difference. But do you detect Tony Blair's hands in this? Because this was something that he, when he was Prime Minister, constantly talked about.
It was, and it's been an idea that's been around for a long time, kicked around and rejected. That's for very good reasons. What I do think, though, is that, you know, you've got to be fair to the Prime Minister. If you're asking him to take decisions and be bold, then at least let him have his decision and let's argue it out. Let's debate it out. Because I'd rather have somebody try to do something concrete than somebody just sort of pussyfooting around the corners.
But he's not being bold by sort of saying we'll deal with illegal migration by making all legal British citizens be able to be tracked by their government in real time. I'm not sure what I genuinely can't even work out why even he thinks that would work.
Well, you're absolutely right. The details of the policy don't seem to stack up in any logical way, and lots of people would agree with that. I think what I'm trying to say, though, is at least he is trying something radical or talking about something radical. I'd rather have the debate than pretend there's no problem. There is definitely a problem. And, you know, you look at the other announcements that Rachel Reeves and others are making this week, it sounds good on paper to deny people benefits if they have been out of work for 18 months, to make sure that they actually have to be contributing and all the rest of it. That sounds great. But for that to happen, if they're going to take paid work, you need businesses to step up and offer that paid work. And of course, businesses are right now being squeezed by the extra taxes and costs of doing business. And they're not in a fit state to come forward and offer this kind of opportunity.
And they don't want to take on, we had a caller earlier, they don't want to take on some sort of feckless youth who's got no work ethic and doesn't want to be there and isn't going to try. And they're worried that these new employment rights that Angela Rayner was busy with before she got, had to resign, that actually they wouldn't be able to get rid of this person. They'd be stuck with them.
And that is exactly the one of the problems that the government is going to face. So a whole bunch of policy ideas being floated this week. All of them sound brilliant if they came to fruition, apart from your ID cards one. But the question is, does this government have the authority and the ability to turn those policies into activity and action on the ground? And it's very, very debatable whether they do.
And it is extraordinary that they have got a majority of, a working majority was 161 and is only not even 15 months into being in power and has completely lost all authority. It's quite extraordinary. How damaging do you think all the, the free gear Keir stuff, the free glasses from Lord Ali and the free suits and his wife's frocks and the football tickets and all of that, and the damaging stuff about Angela Rayner and her hypocrisy over the stamp duty that she was due to pay and didn't pay, and then we've got Keir Starmer and this allegations about this donkey field, sheltering £320,000 in a field basically he bought for 20k about 20 years ago, because we all have a spare 20k to buy a donkey field for his disabled, very elderly mother. Loving gift from his son who was earning good money, and then it all appears to have been wrapped up in a trust, or was it? Dodging questions from the Sunday Times for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, and then having to tackle it on the BBC in an interview yesterday. How damaging do you think any of that is, given that no one's accusing him of breaking the law, but they are saying he's out of touch and he's a hypocrite because he would definitely criticise someone else for doing what he himself has done?
I know you'd like me to say, I think it's damaging in the moment. I think long term, people have very short memories, and there's so many things going on in the world that people won't remember the detail. But what is a problem is if you are trying to run a government in this super complex, fast moving world where there are huge risks and huge challenges, then it's a huge distraction to you as an individual and to the team around you, because you're trying to firefight the whole time. And it's very, very hard to do that and keep an eye on the big prize and the big picture. And that's the thing that your viewers and listeners care about, is who is actually running this country with the debt that we've got and the challenges that we face around the world at this time. And I'd much rather they were not having to deal with that kind of stuff. But short term, sure, it's a problem. Long term, I think people forget.
Yeah. Although lots of it's quite complicated, but we know that the free gear Keir, that definitely stuck with a lot of people. And something about a donkey. I mean, no one, why is he buying a donkey field? A lot of people might say. Just finally, I must ask you. Now, you were a political editor. You counted them in, you counted them out. You dealt with a lot of better prime ministers than certainly Keir Starmer is turning out to be. I know you also now advise big clients on terms of a lot of their. Not just lobbying, but their PR and things as well. If you were going to give a bit of free advice to this government, to Keir Starmer in particular, what would you tell him to do?
Most important thing is to take a very, very clear opinion about what it is you want to achieve as the Prime Minister, put in place the policies and the mechanics to make sure that happens, and go out and communicate about that and not be sidetracked by all the rest of the stuff. Big idea, big picture, give some vision and go after it.
Yeah, he'd need to have the big idea. He'd need to have the competence to be able to make it happen then. And I don't think he has either of those, though. That's the problem.
One of the challenges, if you get into power by sort of constantly juggling plates, balls and spinning plates, is you don't really have a very strong team around you. You mentioned Tony Blair earlier on, and Tony Blair had a phenomenal team around him. Now, Keir Starmer is latterly, in the last few weeks, beginning to take steps to put good people around him. That's what the changes mean. And hopefully for him and for the country, those people will begin to sort things out. But it's a challenge, there's no question about it. And you need a Prime Minister who really believes in a big idea, and that's the question.
I think that's the key, isn't it? So how significant is this meeting between Netanyahu and Trump today in this 21-point peace plan? And how significant is this idea that he would grant an amnesty for Hamas?
This is crunch time. Israel wants to end the war, the longest war in Israel's history, and it wants to end the war by bringing all the hostages home and removing Hamas from power so it can never start another war ever again. And so really this is a make or break moment where Hamas will be put under pressure to lay down its arms, to free those hostages all in one go and finally put this war behind us. President Trump is presenting a 21-point plan, and that plan basically says either Hamas will dismantle itself or Israel will continue going through the Gaza Strip, dismantling Hamas, taking it apart, and handing it over to some transnational authority that will run the Gaza Strip. Some people talking about Tony Blair.
Yeah. Exactly, we were just saying. But there's been this talk, well, OK, anyone can run it. You just can't be Hamas or Fatah or the Iranians. It can't be anyone who poses a threat. Does anyone really want it? I mean, that's the reality, is there's a reason why Egypt hasn't opened its very large border with Gaza. They don't want the Palestinian people. The Jordanians don't want any more. The Saudis don't want any more. No one actually wants these people because they've been so radicalised over the last goodness knows how many years of having Hamas in charge of them. So does anyone really want that job?
Well, and that's the horrible truth. No one really wants to govern the Gaza Strip, at least not in a way that commits it to a future of peace next to its
Well, Israel didn't want to. Israel walked away 20 years ago.
Well, exactly. Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip 20 years ago and got back rockets on Tel Aviv and the death squads of October 7th who burned families alive in their homes and took hostages into Gaza. And now that we're seeing a lot of pressure on Israel to withdraw from the West Bank as well, Israelis are saying, hang on, how can you guarantee that the same thing that happened in Gaza won't happen in the West Bank on a much larger scale? And the real challenge, therefore, after this war, if it ends soon, is going to be how do you transform Gaza from being one big launch pad for attacks against Israel into a peaceful entity that is at peace with its neighbour Israel and isn't committed to more jihad against it.
And that's the thing, it's all very well, and we've had a heckle at Labour Party conference with a pro-Palestinian activist saying, oh, Israel committing genocide, mass starvation in Gaza for 2 years. Again, both complete lies. Provably complete lies, but not that stops the government from recognising a Palestinian state on the basis of those lies. But there's been no conditions at all on Hamas in terms of what they had to do, in terms of releasing the hostages. I mean, we're talking bare sodding minimum at this point, let alone laying down their arms. But realistically, can Netanyahu actually succeed in his aim? And we've given that there's quite a lot of criticism even from leaders of the IDF and many even in his own government, succeed in his aim of completely destroying Hamas. He's taken out pretty much all the leadership in Gaza. He's taken out the leadership in Qatar. He's taken out the people who've been funding it in lots of ways and their ability to arm them in Iran. He's taken out, Hezbollah's, a lot of their rockets and their leadership. Realistically, has he kind of achieved all he can achieve other than getting the hostages out?
And now is crunch time for the world to tell Hamas it's game over. You have to lay down your arms, free the hostages, and end this war. The tragedy is that international pressure on Israel to end the war is giving Hamas every incentive to continue the war.
Yeah.
I mean, Hamas's leaders are calling the recognition of a non-existent Palestinian state a fruit of October 7th. They're doubling down. Razi Ahmed told CNN this weekend that the condemnation of Israel is one of the benefits of October 7th.
Yeah.
Hamas feels that it's vindicated. And that's why now what we need to see is pressure on Hamas's state sponsors. Chief among them, Qatar.
Yeah.
Julia, Qatar is the biggest landowner in London. It owns more land than the Crown. It owns the Shard. It has a massive share in Sainsbury's and in Heathrow Airport as well, and Claridge's. We need pressure on them, on the Islamist dictatorship, backing Hamas to tell it the whole world is saying you have to let go. This war has to end.
It is absolutely extraordinary that, we've got America and the world was happy to go into Afghanistan for sheltering the Al-Qaeda network and Osama bin Laden when they launched the 9/11 attack on New York. and the Pentagon. But we're happy to just play nicey with the Qataris as they've been harbouring the leaders of Hamas who launched that attack on our only democratic ally in the Middle East of Israel. And again, you and I have discussed this many times. It is extraordinary that these, whether it's Keir Starmer or Macron or anyone else, all these people who are telling the Israelis they need to live side by side with people who have vowed to completely and utterly annihilate them, and who has celebrated the not just a terror attack, but the most vile, foul invasion and rape, murder, mutilation, the most horrific events on October the 7th, which some people are still denying, despite all of the evidence that it happened. And somebody who's been to those sites, my God, it's very clear it happened. But the West is still requiring that Israel does something which no other government in the world would ever agree to do.
Yeah, Julia, I think the British and French government's behaviour has been shameful because they've essentially been pressuring Israel to end this war with the jihadi regime that started this war still in power, just a few hundred metres away from people's homes. Let's be clear what happens if this war ends with hostages still in Gaza and Hamas still in power. If this is not the last Gaza war, there will be a next Gaza war because Hamas will never stop until it succeeds in its goal of destroying Israel. You know, Julia, you visited the site of the massacre and people make a mistake when they look at October 7th and think that it was just a terror attack. It wasn't. It was the opening shot of what was meant to be a regional war of annihilation against Israel with all of Iran's proxies. Hezbollah from Lebanon, the Houthis from Yemen, the Iranian regime itself. And Hamas mistimed it, it failed, but that is what Hamas was planning on October 7th.
Let's not ignore that reality. What did you make, just finally, of the speech that your Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave at the UN? And we had this very sort of, staged walkout. Loads of people went into that UN Assembly Hall who wouldn't normally be there, so they could very openly leave. And, oh, look, he's the genocidal leader of Israel, and we're all walking out because we're so moral. What did you make of that, given that they don't seem to feel that way about pretty much any of the genuinely genocidal dictators who they happily sit and listen to and applaud?
Yeah, let's remember, most countries in the United Nations are not democracies. Most of them are autocracies, dictatorships of one form or another. And I think we all make a mistake when we attach any moral authority to the United Nations. I saw that many diplomats from mostly Islamic nations walked out of Netanyahu's speech. It didn't impress me. It's something they do every single year. And they did it where the United Nations, which is meant to be a place where we actually sit and listen to alternative points of view and to other world leaders and try to solve things through dialogue. And so walking out in this sort of petulant hissy fit is not only rude, it just undermines the values of the United Nations that they claim to support. Frankly, it's pathetic.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think an awful lot of eyes on what's going on in the Middle East, this war in Gaza, and Donald Trump and President Netanyahu announcing this 20-point plan. Apparently the 21 points originally mentioned, that one point was this apology call to Qatar, which Netanyahu had already done at this point. Tony Blair having a role in this sort of post-Gaza protectorate board of peace headed by Donald Trump in return for Hamas laying down their weapons, return of the hostages within 72 hours, a huge number, as always, 1,000 plus of people held in Israel, Palestinians held in Israel being released, a little bit of land going to a buffer zone, but basically IDF troops out in a short period, and having this sort of international body run and reconstruct Gaza. Gazans not forced to leave, that was what Trump had originally talked about, but if they do choose to leave, they will have a right of return. I can't see anything that's a downside for Hamas here, other than they lose the leverage of the hostages, and that they've been told they are ousted. But don't they have a route back just by, let's face it, calling themselves something else and coming back and getting elected in years to come?
Well, quite. I mean, there's a sort of willful naivety built into this plan, which is that there's going to be this amnesty for Hamas fighters who just lay down their weapons, the idea that just by command that they should have no place in the kind of future of Gaza going forward doesn't mean that they're not going to try to assert that. That's one thing when you're dealing with these jihadist lunatics, is that there is a tendency to treat them as sort of honest brokers in the same way that any other group might have been previously. You
want this and I want that, let's come to a deal where we get most of it, but they're not. Because also, that's not how they think.
No, absolutely, and Hamas is a good example, because also Hamas are not really interested in a Palestinian state. They want They want Palestine to be the Palestinian wing of an Islamic caliphate. They are
the destruction of Israel, every Jew dead,
Absolutely.
and then spreading the caliphate not just throughout Gaza and the West Bank, the whole of the Middle East, and by the way, Europe too.
Yeah, and as Andrew Fox was pointing out to you a short while ago, they are essentially just the Palestinian wing of the Muslim Brotherhood. This is a broader Islamist, terroristic ideology. These are people who do not just have a kind of set of demands, and if those are met, then they'll happily come round the table and chalk up the win. So maybe there's more to this that we're not quite appreciating yet, and also maybe there is a certain point where even jihadist lunatics' self-interest kicks in. They think if we don't go along with this, we're just going to get again an even more off the reins response from the Israeli government. So who knows? But there is, whenever you're dealing with these Islamist groups, there is a tendency to not believe them when they say that they want to destroy Israel and the West.
That's their aim. And again, I think what's also very interesting is those people who say, people who marched every 2 weeks in the centre of London, and all those people who wave their Palestinian flags and berate me on the tube. Hi, love. Thanks for chatting to me this morning. I'm a terrible person who should be ashamed for supporting Israel. Sweetheart, I'll never be ashamed supporting the only democratic state in the Middle East. Call me old-fashioned. But it is extraordinary how quiet those people are when they're being offered on a plate exactly what they say they want. Peace in Gaza, IDF troops out. Of course, they're quite happy to want the hostages. The hostages don't get much momentum from them, but yes, hostages being returned. All these people who've been detained without trial in Israel, they'll be coming back too. By the way, that's what all wartime governments do. We did it. We would do it in the next war. That's how life works in wartime. But they're getting everything. They're getting everything that they say they want. Okay, not a democratic state. If you think you want a democratic state in Gaza or part of Palestine with Gaza and the West Bank, you are talking about the Hamas terrorists being in charge. No Israeli government of any political hue. You could put Jeremy Corbyn in charge of that one, and even he wouldn't agree to that. I mean, he'd like to. No. Even he would know he would be out of power straight away because Israel would no longer exist at that point. So it's not going to happen. But let's have another little listen to what was said at that press conference yesterday, because as always, Donald Trump, who would be the chair of basically this board of peace, he doesn't like to underplay these things. So this is what he had to say.
This is a big day, a beautiful day, potentially one of the great days ever in civilization. And most importantly, we discussed how to end the war in Gaza, but it's just a part of the bigger picture, which is peace in the Middle East. And let's call it eternal peace in the Middle East.
I mean, why not just add in eternal along with this big day and one of the greatest days ever in civilization? President Netanyahu, standing next to him, was a little bit more dealing with facts, is what he had to say.
I support your plan to end the war in Gaza, which achieves our war aims. It will bring back to Israel all our hostages, dismantle Hamas's military capabilities, end its political rule, and ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel.
Now, would it ensure if Hamas agreed to it that Gaza would never again pose a threat to Israel? Because we're talking about this sort of protectorate, this sort of technocrat government for a period of time. Yeah. And then they're talking about reform within the Palestinian Authority, currently run by Fatah, but actually mass support now, according to polling in the West Bank, is that actually Hamas would win any election. Can they guarantee that Gaza would never again pose a threat to Israel based on these 20 points as we've read them?
Almost certainly not. I mean, it's how you go forward from here, because as you say, the unfortunate truth in all of this is that whilst this technocratic setup where it's kind of going to be presided over by Palestinians, but also kind of external experts, Tony Blair lurking in the background as he always tends to, that's a concession and an admission of the fact that if you did have an election in Gaza tomorrow, you're very likely to have a Hamas landslide, even absent the repression that they're meting out. Obviously, the Palestinian Authority being talked up as the Palestinians that we can do business with, and yet the reason that Mahmoud Abbas is 20 years into a 5-year term now is because he knows that he would be turfed out in favour of Hamas or something.
And bearing in mind, again, people often talk about the moderate Palestinians. If he's moderate, I mean, seriously.
No, I mean, he literally has a PhD in Holocaust denial, and they obviously continue to pay the families of terrorists who have murdered Israelis.
Not like under the table, not under the counter. It's over.
Open secret.
I think she got ministry that did it.
Absolutely, open secret is over sugary. So it's one of those things where that just needs to be recognised, and it's the sort of thing where there's the Hamas question: how do you deal with them immediately? How do you make sure that they do down arms, that they are not a military threat, even if they might continue to be a kind of ideological presence, if you like. The broader question is, when are we going to see, or how might we see, the sufficient kind of sea change within Palestinian politics, civil society, a new layer of leadership emerge which says, you know what, this holy war with Israel nonsense is, if nothing else, going to lead to just more death and destruction on our side. We need a new path. In the absence of that, it's not obvious.
No, and it's very interesting that Arab leaders among the Middle East, whether it's Saudis, whether it's UAE, whether it's like Qatar and Egypt, they're on board. They're on board with this. So we shall see. We're told this is a big keynote speech. Is this another one of his resetting his leadership? Another one of his, telling the people what he stands for? Because I haven't got a clue what he stands for or what this government wants to do.
Well, I think that's what needs to come out of today. There needs to be a story, not just of what the government has done, which they've done quite a lot, but they are not telling a clear, coherent story of what that means and what that means for the future. So there needs to be a vision. There needs to be, this is what the country will look like once we have done the things that we're putting through Parliament, rather than simply just the business of government. They need to have a story of government.
Well, again, I mean, the thing is, what is the story of government? What have they done? Because the thing that most voters are most aware of, according to all the polls, is the winter fuel allowance being cut for 10 million pensioners and then backtracking on it, being forced by Labour backbench to backtrack. I think also national insurance hike for employers and a load of people losing their jobs. I mean, is that a story worth telling?
Well, there's plenty worth telling. There's a lot of legislation that is really exciting, both to Labour members and very popular in the country.
Tell us
you're
the
right.
Story.
Well, for example, bringing the railways back into public ownership, very, very publicly popular and, of course, incredibly popular with Labour members. Things like GB Energy, building 1.5 million new homes, and a lot of those being for social housing. All of these things are popular, and they're popular with Labour members. They're that sweet spot that they can craft a narrative from.
Okay.
But you're right that what they didn't do, particularly with things like winter fuel, was actually build that into the much bigger narrative. It sort of came out of nowhere, and so it didn't fit, and it jarred, and that's why it made such an impact. Because,
and it impacted
nobody
the people,
was really expecting it.
Yeah, it impacted the people that Labour claimed they cared about. I mean, you say railways back into public ownership. Yeah, that's a very popular policy. Most people don't get the train from one year to the next. I mean, not just they don't get it to work, they don't get a train most years. I still haven't worked out, and no one's been able to tell me what it is that GB Energy actually does. And they say they're going to build 1.5 million homes. They're already behind on that target. Yes, there's a lot of rejigging and changing of the planning rules, and I'm all in favour of that. Always been very clear that's a good move. But no one actually thinks they're going to build 1.5 million new homes. We haven't got the builders or indeed the concrete to do it, interestingly. So when you say that's part of the narrative, I'm not sure any of those three things actually touches the size of what voters care about.
Well, they will be judged on delivery on all of these things. If getting a train becomes more popular, which it should.
Why would it become more popular?
And I get them very regularly.
Yeah, I know, but it's a middle-class obsession. No, it's a southern middle-class obsession, the trains. Most people in this country don't get on a train
really
at
isn't.
all.
If you talk to anyone from who has to deal with Northern Rail or anyone trying to get from east to west in this country,
but it's an
rail,
obsession. The
then
middle class is in the south.
It's not a southern middle-class obsession at all.
Most people in this country don't get a train from one year to the next. 80% of people in this country drive to work.
They do, and actually it would be much better if more people had reliable, available, clean, quick, fast and good trains, and that's what I mean when I talk about it'd be great if the
bringing
trains
them back
were better
into
and more
public
of us were
ownership.
moving out of our cars and moving on to them.
But, yeah, okay, most people don't live on a direct train route to their workplace, and bringing them back into public ownership won't make a blind bit of difference to that. Look, the things people care about, they care about the economy, they do care about the NHS. We've got this announcement on sort of virtual national NHS appointments. I mean, that sounds good. Take another 2 years if it happens. But we've also got the issue on migrants. Now, one of the things Keir Starmer seems to be hinting at in this speech is that the need, got to get tough on the migrant issue, not just smashing the gangs. Singularly failing to do that so far. We're 40% plus up on the year before in terms of the number of migrants who've crossed here. We've only managed to do an exchange programme with about 6 of them so far with France. And dealing with legal migrants, he decries a policy that acknowledged by reformers racist and immoral on Sunday. And on Monday, his own Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, announced pretty much the same policy, except it didn't apply retrospectively, which apparently means it's not immoral and racist. I mean, it's not a coherent strategy, is it?
I mean, there are. I think the difference between the reform plan and what Shabana Mahmood has set out, I mean, partly you're absolutely right, the retrospective thing just seems weird and cruel. But there is a real issue with migration, and I think Labour have been too squeamish about saying that for a long time. We need to be conscientious about protecting our borders and making sure that the people who apply to be here legally are able to apply to be here legally in a way that works, and those who are not able to be here legally are removed. And I think it's not a racist thing to say that, and I don't think it's either an anti-Labour thing to say that. And Labour needs to make sure that they are taking that message, but making sure that when they say that, they are then saying, but those who are here legally, who come to our country, who are entitled to asylum, are properly looked after and assimilated so that they can contribute to this society. And that's the more Labour message.
OK, I mean, that is the more Labour message. But you said here there is a real issue on migration, and the Labour's been too squeamish to talk about it. Look, obviously you're not representing the Labour Party as such, or the government. I understand that. You're speaking as the editor of Labour List. But the reality is, actually, the Labour Party, and certainly the Labour leadership, has not recognised there's a problem with migration, legal or illegal, particularly legal, vast, mass immigration. Though people like me from 2000 onwards who said, I'm not sure this is a good idea, we were decried as racist, been called far right by lots of Labour people. Your side has been telling us that they're a massive economic boon to the country, and anyone who thinks differently doesn't like brown people, even when it's white people who are immigrants from Eastern Europe, for goodness sake. So it's not that Labour's been squeamish about saying it or doing anything. Labour didn't even acknowledge it was a problem and told off the people who said it was and called them far right and racist. That's not being squeamish. That's just, you had your heads in the sand for a long time.
Look, Labour have a long history of being an internationalist party. Sometimes that's come with not recognising some of the issues around migration. That is certainly true of the past, but I think anyone, and certainly some of the people on the left of the Labour Party who are upset at some of the rhetoric that has been used by the current leadership, would tell you that that's not where Labour is right now. And that, I think what's important is what Labour's doing now. And I think there has been a focus on the immigration issue since Labour's been in power. It's going to take time. There was a huge asylum backlog that they inherited, and getting that system working, and not just working in a way that deals with the backlog, but working in a way that deals with everything that needs to be done around issues like making sure that we're housing people in a way that is acceptable both to those human beings, but also to the communities that find them people living in their midst. Making sure that we are assimilating people, making sure that people are learning English.
How do you do that? I mean, how do you do that if people arrive? And we've seen the figures, and yes, it happened under the Tories, not under Labour. But we basically had, was it 1.6 million more people arrive in this country, largely actually from the Indian subcontinent, Nigeria as well. But just arriving in this country, how on earth do you assimilate that many people arriving in 1 or 2 years?
Well, I mean, as you say, that was something that's happened over the previous government. I think what you need to do is make sure that there are conditions that make people feel welcome, but also make people feel like they have a responsibility to the country that they're living in. I think we all have a responsibility to our country, and some of those things are important, like, for example, putting the English requirements on.
Okay.
Some people get, again, squeamish about that. I'm not one of them, not least because it's actually really important to make sure that we build community, and one of the key things that communities can do is communicate with each other.
Well, exactly. If you can't speak to somebody, you can't get a job, you can't communicate at the school gate, etc. I mean, again, this is stuff David Cameron was talking about quite some years ago, again, decried by the left over it. But you mentioned earlier, you said, it's interesting, you said that the reform policy, and reform are getting a lot of attention this week at Labour Party conference, very much the focus, in fact, of the Tories as well. But the retrospective aspect of deportations of people who have been here, often even been given, indefinite leave to remain, because they basically arrived here, they've worked here after 5 years, and then they're entitled to basically apply to stay here for the rest of their lives, bring their family members, go on benefits, they're going to get a pension later on, I mean, all of that. But actually, they're not net contributors to this country. People who've even committed criminal offences being able to stay in this country. You're saying that a retrospective deportation of people like that, you're saying that's weird and cruel. Why is that weird and cruel? If I went to live in another country, whether it was France or Pakistan or Brazil, if I was not a net contributor to that country, if I wasn't working, I was living on benefits, or I committed a crime, I would absolutely expect that country to say, off you go, toddle off home.
Well, because of everything we've just been talking about building community.
I don't want to build a community with someone who's arrived from Pakistan, doesn't speak English, commits a crime, and doesn't have a job. I don't want to build a community with a Canadian or an Australian who does the same.
Communicate. If we want people to contribute, then we need to make sure that they have the security that allows them to put the effort into doing that.
What do you mean by that?
If we just say, oh well, there's a sword of Damocles hanging over your head. We can change the policy at any time.
Yeah.
The settled status you think you have is going to disappear. What incentive is there then to actually assimilate?
Well, the incentive would be.
People to contribute.
No, Emma, the incentive would be to assimilate, to learn good English, to get a job, to work hard, to not rely on the state and not expect that the host nation pays for you.
And then you have your leave to remain removed anyway.
No, but you wouldn't have it. No, but you wouldn't. That's the whole point of the policy. You would No, Nigel Farage's policy was you would reapply, and then you would have to show that you weren't a drain on the economy here, and you were contributing. Why would that be, in your words, weird and cruel?
You're a second-class citizen, even though you...
you're not a citizen. You're a foreigner living in another country.
You're not a citizen. No, that was a poor choice of words on my part.
So
you're second class.
Yes, you don't have the same rights.
You're not allowed to be part of the place where you live. Now, I don't know about you, but being part of my community...
No, you're not part of it, though, because you're a foreigner.
Same as my neighbours.
No, if I go and live in France, I'm not French. I'm British. I'm a foreigner. I can integrate, I can make a contribution, but I'm not French.
However British you are, you might feel part of that village. You want to contribute,
you want to
build community. And that's what we're
But nothing would stop you doing...
wants to take away from people is the ability to build community, to feel part of something.
No, there's nothing in that policy that says that. There's nothing in the policy that says that. On the contrary, it requires and encourages people to do the exact thing you say that they want to do anyway.
It takes something away from people that they feel that they've already earned, that they have got through that contribution
for 5 years, and now I can
If you want to do it going forward, then you're removing the security that allows us to build community, and that security is absolutely at the heart of how people can build their communities and take part in their everyday lives, in their neighbourhoods.
I'm just not quite sure what community people have to offer the local community if they come to this country, barely speak the language, give up work after 5 years and are relying on benefits. I'm not quite sure what contribution
I can tell you that the neighbours I have are absolutely contributing.
Well,
they're a great community.
So if they
reapplied, WhatsApp group, it's fabulous.
So if they reapplied to leave to stay, they would be able to stay. So what's the problem?
Well, because why are they having to reapply?
Because they're not British.
What a whole load of... If Nigel Farage wants to cut bureaucratic waste, why is he making people do everything twice?
Because after 5 years, someone might no longer be working and contributing.
Yeah, and why? So why are you having? If you've already got settled leave to remain, you have proved that you've reached the conditions for it. Why are we making people jump through that hoop all over again?
Because the conditions that have been given to people to leave to remain.
You've already got it.
They've been very minimal.
I thought Nigel Farage wanted less government waste.
They've been very, very minimal. Well, because if someone after 5 years is able to not work, claim benefits, be entitled to pensions and all of that, then actually that's an awful lot of extra cost to British taxpayers who may well love having a chat with that person over the garden fence, but may not want to pay taxes.
There's an awful lot of extra cost to British taxpayers of having to go after everybody who's already proved their worth.
They haven't proved their worth.
And living in this country.
Well, listen,
But they've got settled leave to remain. They've got the settled leave to remain.
That doesn't mean they've proved their worth to this country. That doesn't. The bar to get settled leave to remain is you've been here 5 years. It's not a high bar, Emma. It's not a high bar.
Well, I think there is more to it than that, and we both know that.
Not much.
Ultimately,
not much. What kids are being taught in our schools is quite shocking. Again, they're inundated with propaganda, whether it's about climate change or immigration, trans ideology, and I don't think most parents have a clue how much their children are being indoctrinated. But a school, the Broad Oak School in Partington in Greater Manchester, had to apologise after a teacher made a presentation to students which was criticised for being impartial and unbalanced. Partial and unbalanced, I'd say. The school teacher admitted telling students that St George's flags can be viewed as racist symbols. I mean, on what basis? And this is, of course, after this trend of St George's flags being hung from lampposts around the UK. And this all started after, I think, was it Birmingham City Council, where they had a whole load of Palestinian flags being hung, and people went, why are there a load of Palestinian flags being hung on our, but we would like the Union flag, our country's flag. And yet, I bet if a teacher had said that the Palestinian flag could be taught to be racist, I bet they'd be being disciplined by their school. It is just extraordinary. We are the only country in the world that teaches that the images, the emblems of our nation, our nationhood, of our culture, of our history, of our people are racist.
Yeah, I mean, I think this teacher went on to say, if I read the story correctly, that the St George's flag or the Union flag are not intrinsically racist.
That's nice.
But some people do see them that way. Well, the people who see them that way tend to be lefty woke teachers in our state comprehensive schools. Those are the ones who seem to see it that way. It is extraordinary. I mean, unfortunately, I think our education system and to some degree the curriculum has fallen into the hands of people who don't much like our country and are determined to teach children that they shouldn't like it either. What I'm interested to know is what disciplinary action has been taken against this teacher. Yeah. So it's one thing for the head to send out a letter to the parents bemoaning what was said and apologising if any offence was caused, but that seems to me insufficient. Yeah. If we have teachers teaching this sort of stuff in classrooms, in my view, they should be removed, not just a letter sent to parents apologising.
Sent to the re-education camp. I mean, who knows? Who else needs to be re-educated? The Bar Council. They represent barristers in England and Wales. Very, very, very crucial job. If you ever get accused of a crime, charged with a crime, go to court, you will need a barrister to represent you. They've got a 6-week summer internship scheme. Absolutely. I mean, extraordinary opportunity for people to get on that, to make their way into a very difficult career to get into. It's only going to allow black or mixed-race university students and graduates to join. White students are barred from this programme. It's known as the 10,000 Black Interns programme and described by, the independent MP Rupert Lowe as pure racism. There's no doubt at all that some of the top professions in this country are very difficult for kids from, let's go with ordinary backgrounds to come from. There's a lot of sharp-elbowed middle classes. People, mums like me, who can help provide links, OK? But why on earth would, say, for instance, a black kid that's gone to Eton be allowed to go on this programme, but a white kid growing up on a housing estate in, say, Liverpool, where the Labour conference is right now, would not be judged to be someone deserving of this? I mean, this is racism, isn't it?
Oh, straight down the line, racism. Racism goes both ways. I mean, I don't think you should discriminate on the grounds of race whatsoever. Yeah. If you want to sort of have a beady eye on, there could be a lot of great raw talent out there amongst young people that hasn't yet flourished because they didn't have the opportunity to, complete their A-levels, go to a top university, go to university at all or whatever, by all means, try and pick out that potential. But to do it on the grounds of race is absolutely extraordinary. Can you imagine if it was the other way round?
Yeah,
Only
exactly.
whites need apply. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And, you know, I think we need to sort of get back to the key Martin Luther King motto. He would be spinning in his grave about this. You judge people on the content of their character, not the colour of their skin. Well, the Bar Council are doing exactly that. They're judging people on the colour of their skin, not the content of their character.
Just extraordinary.
Outrageous.
It really is, and it does need to be called out. And again, this idea there's a sort of historical wrong that needs to be righted, and it's like, no, lots of the top jobs are largely white because we're a largely white country, and the large proportion of the population who are not white in this country are fairly recent arrivals, or the children of recent arrivals, and there is a natural progression in every country from that. Again, I just find it extraordinary that people stir up this stuff. I really do. I must ask you about this, as you know, someone you know, popular conservatism, but also, you know, you're at the Institute of Economic Affairs, a free market think tank. We had a lot of madness going on during COVID and during lockdown, and one of the mad things were these VIP lanes for either MPs or peers, particularly Tories, to say, oh, hello, I know somebody who's got a business that can provide just with some latex gloves for the nurses or some PPE gowns for the hospitals. One of those such people, it turns out, was the Tory peer Michelle Mone, although she pretended to have nothing to do with it later in all documents. It turns out that she basically touted her own business set up by her own husband, Doug Barrowman. This was a company called PPE MedPro to provide 25 million gowns to hospitals. 122 million pounds they were going to be paid for this. Turns out they were faulty, they weren't sterile. Court this morning has ruled that this was incorrect, improper, and has ordered the company to repay that money. What do you make of that case?
Well, good that the money should be repaid. It's a straight breach of contract, isn't it? If you order something that isn't up to snuff, you get your money back. Yep. So the UK taxpayer should get the 122 million back. Look, it's a tricky one, this. I think, Julia, you and I would agree that the government handled COVID extraordinarily badly and often quite madly. But let's imagine a national emergency where you suddenly need to lay your hands on a lot of stuff. Could be medical stuff, could be metal, could be God only knows silicon chips, God only knows what. It does seem to me in that scenario that it's not unreasonable for the government to say, look, has anyone got any contacts at all? Yeah. Does anyone in Parliament know anybody who makes this stuff? But there were no even
basic cursory checks made. I made more checks on the bloke who comes to clean my windows than these people made on people that were handing millions or even billions of pounds to.
Well, I think that you're right on the checks, and I think you suggested that earlier in the show, Julia, as well, that there should have been a much clearer undertaking. So, great. You're in the VIP fast lane. OK, potentially we can get millions of medical gloves or masks or whatever else we're supposed to need from this company. However, you've got to sign in blood on the dotted line that you understand very clearly the spec that we're asking for. And if you do not deliver to that spec, we will come after you, not just to recoup our money, but for the distraction and confusion and discombobulation that you have proven.
Could have cost
VIP
lives.
fast lines, yes, but with a big list of T's and C's attached to them.
Absolutely. Basic stuff. Again, the fact that no one in our government, no civil servant appears to be able to write a decent contract or read one, I find utterly despairing. Let's see, a very good afternoon to you, Debbie.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you. I just want to clarify for those who don't know, you live as if you were a trans woman, but you also accept that you are a man biologically, and I'm happy to use whichever pronouns I choose, and I choose the biological and grammatically correct ones, and you're happy with that because, frankly, you know, why wouldn't you be? But just so people understand the context there. Extraordinary headline. New trans rules go too far, says Labour deputy leadership frontrunner. Now, I think most people with jobs and lives, and frankly, anyone who's even got, you know, a Netflix log on, will not know who is running for the deputy leadership of the Labour Party after Angela Rayner had to step down. But it's Lucy Powell and Bridget Phillipson. Bridget Phillipson is still the Education Secretary. She's the favourite candidate for Keir Starmer's leadership. Lucy Powell got sacked as Commons leader, basically not being very good, but she's being considered the leftist alternative, and she's by far the favourite, it would appear, in that contest. Now, both women, I think, have rather questionable views on the trans issues when it comes to women's rights. But Lucy Powell has appeared to criticise the Equality and Human Rights Commission and their guidance on trans issues. And it's advised, in line with the Supreme Court ruling from April, that workplaces must provide single-sex spaces based on biological sex. She says these new trans rules, she says, are, quote, not right. She says, I think we've got some of the language not right on this, and particularly around some of the guidance that's coming forward. She says, I really strongly feel like we need a robust and transparent parliamentary conversation about that, because when we're looking at applying the law as parliamentarians, we should have a say on that, and that's something I'll be pushing for as well. I mean, it's a word salad of nothing nonsense, but what does she think is not right about a woman's toilet being only for women?
Well, when it comes to language, I presume she's not talking about having a Welsh translation for use in Wales. It seems to me that, like too many other politicians, she's caught between conflicting groups and she's trying to please everybody all of the time. She can't do that. As a politician, she needs to show some leadership on this, as others do, and say, quite frankly, we all know the difference between men and women. Let's face it, if 30 years ago somebody had said that Parliament needed to have a vote on who uses the women's toilets and who uses the men's toilets, we would just...
Well, I mean, if that was done, you know, in a satirical comedy, show, we'd all go, God, what a mad world that would be. Hello, welcome to 2025.
Yeah.
And the idea that any parliamentarian and Parliament itself should waste any time on that is mind-blowing, when there's quite a lot of stuff that does need doing.
Well, quite, you know, it's just madness that Parliament's getting involved in this. We all know the difference between men and women, and for time immemorial, human beings and human societies have been able to make this distinction. Yeah. We still have that capability, and politicians just need to leave human beings to get on with it, as we've always done in the past.
Well, but the argument from the trans rights lobby is, well, you should leave trans people to get on with it and let them choose the bathroom or the changing room or the women's refuge or the prison cell that they feel most comfortable with. And again, as campaigners, from famous ones like J.K. Rowling down to other people busy losing their jobs for saying this, saying, well, no, that's not the point of single-sex spaces.
Yeah, and it just elevates the rights of the individual above the rights of the group. There's a wider issue about human rights legislation in any case, where it promotes the rights of the individual and ignores the rights of the wider group. And perhaps that's gone it's been pushed too far in one direction, and this is symptomatic of that wider problem.
I mean, do you mind me asking, I'm sure I've asked you before, Debbie, what you do in your workplace or when you're out and about at the shopping centre, where you're presenting as if you're a woman but you're a man, before the Supreme Court ruling, since the Supreme Court ruling, has that changed anything? What do you choose to do?
Well, the Supreme Court ruling didn't make any difference for me. At work, we've got a mixture of provision. I work in a school and we've got individual staff cubicles dotted around the place, so I use those. And when I'm out in town, I know which coffee shops have which small coffee shops have the individual cubicles for everybody. It doesn't take a lot of research to actually work that out and make things work for me.
And you take that upon yourself as something that you do, so you don't impose how you want to live your life on other people, particularly, say, girls in girls' toilets.
Well, that's right. The argument I make against me using women's spaces, because sometimes women think I'm being ridiculous, but I've often said is that if you let me in there, then it's much harder for you to say no to the next person who says, you let Debbie in, why not me?
Exactly. While people will want to be, respectful and kind and understanding, as you say, and then someone who's blatantly, obviously not someone who is who really believes that they are living in the as the opposite gender will then say, well, I've got a right to come in, and there's a reason why we kept men out of women's spaces. There was a reason why we wanted single-sex toilets, and frankly, most men, 99% of them, don't want to be in the same toilets as women anyway. It is extraordinary, isn't it? But I find it fascinating. You've got two women in this debate in Labour who are this is coming up as an issue, and it's almost like they're competing to give away women's hard-won rights and girls' hard-won safety. Bridget Phillipson's the Education Secretary. I simply have not heard her say, since that Supreme Court ruling or before, every single school, single-sex toilet provision, primary school, secondary school, absolutely nothing to discuss. You've got till, next September, she should have said in April, get it sorted, otherwise you'll be breaching the law. Why has she not done that?
Well, presumably this is a political decision, and it's the worry about upsetting people. And in politics, if you've two groups and you please one and upset the other, the group that you upset is going to cause you more grief than you get thanks from the other group. Yeah. So the result is just kick the can down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I ask you also about J.K. Rowling and her battles with her ungrateful little pipsqueak no-mark, Emma Watson, along with the other the boys who were big stars of the Harry Potter films? She made these young actors at the age of 14 into multi-millionaires for life, can do whatever they want with their lives. As she made it very clear in a long post she wrote on social media, she doesn't expect them to agree with her views. They're not required, because they wrote a film that she wrote to agree with any of her political views. But she has been, you know, pretty upset by them, in particular Emma Watson, you know, basically coming in for the attack, believing to refer to J.K. Rowling as a witch, you know, and various other comments about her views. And when, at a time when J.K. Rowling was facing death threats, rape threats to her family and to herself, massive security needed, over simply stating the most, I mean, reasonable, kind views about the need for women's rights to be protected versus trans rights that were trampling on them. She's basically called her out and said, look, some of us understand these needs for women because we weren't all multimillionaires at 14. What did you make of that debate and that battle of war of words?
Well, I feel for J.K. Rowling. She's put so much into this, and she's defended the rights of other women. And she just sounds totally exasperated with people who really are now old enough to know better, and who have given her so much grief, attacked her in so many unpleasant ways. And in her position, you know, I can totally understand how exasperated she is with the situation. She's done nothing wrong in this position, but taken so much flack from other people.
Yeah, indeed. I also want to get you up to date on that breaking news coming out of Manchester. And we do now know that 4 people have been injured in that attack outside a synagogue at the Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester. The Greater Manchester Police has confirmed that the suspect did not gain access to the building, but a car was driven at members of the public who were outside the synagogue. Bearing in mind today is Yom Kippur. It's the most significant, the holiest day of the year in the Jewish calendar, when every Jewish family will be at synagogue. 4 people injured in that attack. Reports that a guard, of course all synagogues now in Britain outrageously need to have have guards of some sort, but a guard was attacked with a knife. At this point, firearms officers were deployed and shots were fired. Now, one man was shot. He is believed to have been the offender, and it is believed, according to Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, that he is dead, but it has not been confirmed. The Greater Manchester Police have said that their terrorism may well be involved. Well, look, we're still in the studio with me. I've got Philip Ingram, MBE. He's a former senior military intelligence officer, joining us for the whole show. Very grateful that Mike Neville has stayed with us for a few moments. He's a former Metropolitan Police DCI. Do want to carry on a conversation about the Met Police as well, Mike, but in terms of this attempted, this stabbing at a Manchester synagogue, we're told, you know, multiple people involved, multiple people injured, firearms police being involved. This is a very serious incident.
It is a very serious incident, and I pray for the people who have been injured, and I also for the police officers who've been bravely tasked there. One of the things I picked up on what you said there, Julia, was that I went to give a talk in a synagogue about forensic science, and I was shocked at the time a security guard had to let me. That's how bad it's got. And that was 4 or 5 years ago. That the fact that people have to have a security guard on a place of worship is absolutely terrible.
I live in North London, lots of synagogues, even the Jewish schools have to have security guards, and the local Jewish community centre and the local synagogue. It is an absolute outrage and an embarrassment to our country that is needed.
It is an embarrassment to our country, and I just hope, I'm sure the Greater Manchester Police, the counter-terrorism branch, they'll be looking into this incident. They'll know by now who this suspect is. They'll know. They'll be looking into, is he involved with any other people? Are they going to, looking, can they prevent any other attacks?
How much information will we be getting, and how soon? Remember, we've had this whole big debate about, do we find out? I mean, the ethnicity, the the nationality or whatever.
Julia, I can tell you it was a white man in Liverpool. You remember that? That's the cynicism that when
white British man.
When we're not told is when people get very cynical. And let's hope that the Greater Manchester Police, I'm sure the counter-terrorism branch, they're utterly professional and they're on their case. Let's hope their press department is as professional as they are.
Yeah, if it's counted, if it's a terrorism, they haven't ruled it in, ruled it out, but it's certainly something they're looking at. If that is the case, the obvious assumption we are going to make, and in no way am I claiming to know this or the reports are claiming this, but the obvious assumption people will not unreasonably make is that there is a, an Islamic fundamentalist ideological background to this.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that is the case. I do not know that to be sure, but that would be the obvious leap to make.
Absolutely, and that's what people say. And then what people can see is there's been the marches about Palestine, the continual flags. It's just almost like whipping it up. We've had MPs voted in across this country on policy in Gaza rather than policies in Oldham or something. Like this is how we're becoming. It's become crazy in this country that we're looking into things. We've become grouped together. People are voting in blocks. It should never have happened, and this is where we find ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Mike, I want to come back to you and say on another big story involving the Metropolitan Police, but Philip Ingram, you're a former senior military intelligence officer, and again, I think in terms of what people are going to think may well be the motive of this, again, we don't know, but we have seen this, shouting of genocide about Israel in Gaza, which is not happening, mass starvation, and this evil Israel, all this stuff, and we get it from foreign secretaries and prime ministers, and and it's people from the very, very, very top, and that conflation in many people's minds with ordinary British people who are Jewish, who may or may not even be pro-Israel, they may not agree with any government policy, but have absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with a war happening in the Middle East, but being targeted. Now, we don't know that is the cause. It may have nothing to do with this. There may be a grievance from somebody who used to work at the synagogue. We don't know, and it's very important that we need to state that. But people will be suspicious.
Oh, they'll be very suspicious, and this is where information is the tool that the police need to use to get the truth out in the street. That security guard probably wasn't Jewish, may not have been Jewish. The people who were hit by the car may have just been passers-by and all the rest of it. But the immediate response from the police is to deal with the immediate attack, to prepare for any additional threats that might be around, because you don't know, to sort the casualties out, and then secure the scene for further evidence and try and work out what goes on.
It does sound extraordinary that someone would ram a car outside a synagogue on the holiest day of the year. I mean, that's, you're looking at motive then. But also, crucially, the armed police appear to have been on the scene very, very quickly.
But we saw that in 2017 with the terrorist attacks.
Yeah, but then you're talking about Westminster and London Bridge, where you would expect police to be on the...
And Manchester, a major city, you have got a significant number of armed police around and dealing with it. And you never know. There might have been intelligence in the background suggesting that there was potential, so there might have been increased patrols in the streets. We don't know, and it's dangerous to speculate at this stage.
Well, we'll keep you up to date on any developments on that, but certainly Greater Manchester Police and indeed Andy Burnham, the mayor, have said that the immediate danger is certainly over, and the latest reports say that the suspect involved in the incident is believed to have acted alone. Right, Mike Neville, let me just come back, since I've got you in the studio. We didn't get to have, because of this story, such a long chat about this Metropolitan Police investigation that's now taking place after this BBC undercover filming at Charing Cross Police Station. It's in central London, right near Trafalgar Square. Now, this is a station that's been criticised many, many, many times as well before, investigation after investigation. But this secret filming by an undercover reporter, revealing, some extraordinarily just prehistoric views of some of these officers, attitudes towards women who claim to be raped. A woman who's pregnant, claiming domestic abuse and raped by her partner. Well, so she says. Now, okay, to be fair, it's an allegation, it's not proven. But laughing about sort of violence against some inmates and custody sergeants. People who have extraordinary power. Now, you were mentioning just before the news, there is this issue, you put an undercover reporter into any workplace, you will find people say, I mean, good God, we wouldn't last 3 seconds here. Certainly I wouldn't. I've always defended, you know, the right people like to make, you know, dark jokes and things like that. And I certainly also think people would be allowed to say personal things in WhatsApp groups that are private, that are not public. They're not standing up in the middle of a work meeting and saying this or that. Is it different though when you're talking about people who have been given statutory power over us they have power over, you know, whether you're black, white, man or woman or whatever, if you're arrested and you're in a custody suite, the idea that the people who are in control of your safety and your freedom do appear to have views which are not very pleasant about large groups of people. Let's go with that.
Well, let's say this, that these comments are unacceptable, what's been said, these views. But the trouble is, we ask men and women to deal with the most horrible incidents, most frightening things, horrible people sometimes. And there is this issue about dark humour, saying things that, you know, to burn off. If you're put in a stressful situation, you've been fighting with somebody, if we're saying we want people who can grab hold, have to fight with people who come in the things, who are spitting at them and put them in the cell, and we expect them to behave like saints all the time, then it ain't happening.
I completely agree with you.
So we've got to temper this, and we've got to say that these things are unacceptable, they've got to be dealt with. But as I've said, if it's the case that a doctor can leave an operating theatre, have sex with a nurse and come back after leaving a patient who might die, can keep his job, then I say that these officers should be disciplined and taught a lesson for what they've done, got a grip of. But what we're seeing people calling for their heads. And likewise, when we roll back to the grooming gangs, how many senior officers allowed all that wickedness to go on, and they have kept their jobs. So let's put it in the balance. And I can only reiterate, as you said, if you put this, a hospital's the same sort of environment, stressful, you've got drama, you're
dealing with
frightened,
drunks and
you're dealing with
violent
all sorts of
people,
bad things, and people are going to say things. So it would be anywhere. So to portray the Met as uniquely it's untrue.
I was thinking the military very much the same as well. Philip Ingram, your thoughts on that?
Well, very, very much so.
We're not excusing some of the language and the attitudes, but
the dark humour. I remember one story about a buddy and the two buddies going and attacking the Falkland Islands, and one of them gets hit with a mortar round, his leg's blown off. He's lying there screaming in the ground, saying, "I've lost my leg, I've lost my leg," and his buddy comes up to him and says, "No, you haven't, you silly," and used racist language because he was and said, "It's lying over there, now let's get this sorted," and both of them burst into laughter.
But that's how you cope with that sort of horror. And that's the thing, and people's use language. Again, I think the key thing we've discovered over the last few years, when all this has emerged, is we've got St Mark Rowley, the Met Chief, who refuses to, will not say the words, you know, this is not systemic. And I think he's right on that. And it's not something that all people believe. I mean, I've got friends who are coppers. I don't believe for a moment they've ever had those thoughts. But when someone's just been, you know, smashing you over the head with a bottle, and you've been dealing with someone, you know, severely mentally ill, and it's just sort of for the 15th time that day, and someone's vomited on you, I've got a funny feeling that their language will be pretty darn choice. And again, I think most of us who sit at desk jobs don't really understand that, and we're making judgments. But we do have an issue, because we know that there are officers who are women who are gay, who are black or Asian, who say they have had to leave, they have faced outrageous behaviour, and we know that officer after officer, and I had them tell me either on air, off air, or in person, that, you know, if you speak out, that canteen culture is, everyone knows that, you know, John's the wrong one.
Julia,
but if you
no
speak out,
anymore.
you're the but you know what I mean. That if you speak out, you're the one who's going to be ostracised, not them.
I don't know. I think the police moved a long way to where people could feel safe to make complaints. People came to me when I was a boss, and I dealt with them greatly. And I think these people should be dealt with. What I'm only asking is that we temper it, and we judge them as we judge other people. And we judge, as I say, there's often a snobbery, I find, with doctors and the like. They're middle class and nice, and the police officers are the plebs and working class, and they often get the bad treatment compared to what the doctors and nurses
Can
get.
I just read you both just a statement we've said? Keir Starmer is flying back from the European European Political Community Summit in Denmark to chair an emergency COBRA meeting on the Manchester attack. That would certainly suggest that terror is considered to be the motive. We understand from the police that this suspect who has been shot, he's not confirmed yet whether he's dead or alive, did act alone. But the Prime Minister's issued a statement saying, "I'm appalled by the attack at a synagogue in Crumpsall. The fact that this has taken place on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, makes it all the more horrific. My thoughts are with the loved ones of all those affected, and my thanks go to the emergency services and all the first responders." Your response to that, Philip Ingram?
Well, Prime Minister coming back to respond if it is a single lone attacker that's been dealt with seems a little bit over the top. He's got a Home Secretary who's empowered to do this sort of thing, and it should be that.
A bomb disposal unit is now at the scene. So
I've seen unconfirmed videos coming from the scene where the police firearms officers who shot the individual were saying, "We think he's got a bomb. Please move back." So there's unconfirmed reports that there could be something else.
So we're looking in this case at a car being used as a weapon to ram people, then stabbing and having a bomb.
Like the 2017 attacks on London Bridge and Borough Market and elsewhere. Yeah. So it's a standard thing that different terror groups groom people into self-radicalising and carrying out these sorts of attacks because they're easy to do.
And that's the thing, you can't, if it's one person on their own sitting in their bedroom with the internet, not making contact with anybody else.
As of today, there are 3,000 people under active investigation by the Metropolitan Counter-Terror Police in 900 investigations. That is a huge number of people that are keeping people awake.
Can we point out that the vast majority of those will be Islamist extremists?
Yes, the majority are.
I know a lot of people talk about far-right extremism and terrorism.
An increasing percentage
in this country, the threat is
majority are Islamist.
Mike Neville?
Well, what I can do is I'm looking at the bomb disposal officers who have to go there and deal with that dangerous weapon, but the police will be hoping that they can defuse it safely because that will provide an enormous amount of evidence about is it real explosives. They'll be searching on the computers, digital devices of this suspect to see
were they radicalised?
Who supplied this stuff. So let's hope that the bomb disposal staff are safe, they defuse it, and that gives the police some real insight into how this character operates and if they can get the other people who supplied the equipment that he's used.
Yeah, indeed. Or such that you would even need other people to supply it, given a lot of this stuff is available on the internet about how to make these sort of bombs. Let's say that's getting you up to date on what is going on. We'll keep you up to date on what's going on at the scene in Manchester. Bomb disposal unit at the scene. Firearms officers have been deployed. The suspect has been shot after ramming his car into, I believe it is a man, I think we can safely say, his car into people outside a synagogue on the holiest day of the year in the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur, and a security guard is believed to have been stabbed. This is the point at which police officers were deployed. But Keir Starmer is flying back from a summit in Denmark to chair an emergency COBRA meeting on the Manchester attacks, now obviously believed to be a terror attack with bomb disposal unit at the scene. More on that coming up. More with Philip Ingram. Big thank you to Mike Neville, former Metropolitan Police DCI. Thank you so much. This is Talk. Just to get you up to date, that breaking news, what does appear to have been a terror attack on a synagogue in Greater Manchester, the Heaton Park Synagogue, on the holiest day of the year in the Jewish calendar, that's Yom Kippur. 4 people injured, one security guard stabbed after a man rammed his car into people on the outside the synagogue. Firearms police have been deployed. The suspect is believed to have been shot. Not known yet whether he's dead or alive. Now, the Prime Minister is flying back early from a summit in Denmark to chair an emergency COBRA meeting on the attack. It's not been confirmed as a terror attack, but that would certainly suggest that seems to be what the authorities are suspecting. It's believed that a bomb disposal unit is currently at the scene, as well as the paramedics and armed police, concerned that there is a bomb that needs to be dismantled. Keir Starmer has issued a statement saying he's appalled by the attack and his thoughts with the loved ones of those affected, and thanks the emergency services and all the first responders. Philip Ingram, there's no doubt at all that we have seen. I mean, again, we don't know the motives yet of the suspect. We have speculated on what would be considered to be most likely. The fact that COBRA meeting is happening suggests, terror attack. What would be the motives for attacking a synagogue on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar? I mean, look, Islamist extremism would be the explanation for most people. But we've also had a whole raft of people who have been demonising not just Israel, Israelis and Jews here in Britain and abroad for the actions in Gaza in response to the October 7th attack. We're coming up to the anniversary, coming up on Tuesday, of that has demonised them, deified the pro-Palestine movement. There is every possibility that it could be related to that as well.
I think there's more than every possibility. I think there's a much stronger link to it, and therefore those politicians that have been stirring up a lot of the anti-Semitism, the anti-Jewish sentiment that there is in this country need to be ashamed of themselves, because they will have helped stimulate this. And we've seen it across Europe. Yesterday there was a bomb attack at the Oktoberfest in Germany. I've seen unconfirmed reports of stabbing in Dublin from a migrant against a jogger. You tend to find patterns of these happen in different countries, and you're getting all of that, pro-Palestinian, anti-Jewish, and linking the Jewish religion to anti-Israeli sentiment.
And of course they always say no, it's not anti-Semitic, but the rise in anti-Semitic attacks it comes. Also, by the way, we've got a peace plan on the table accepted by the leader of Israel, by Benjamin Netanyahu. Still waiting for a response though from the Hamas leaders. Still haven't had one. In fact, they're busy being shooting rockets.
But it'll all be Israel and America's fault whenever they don't accept it, and they're still going out and killing members of the Israeli Defense Forces and firing rockets into Israel and all the rest on a daily basis. So the politicians that are blindly coming out and just supporting it are behind a lot of the sentiment that will have led to some of the incidents that have happened in the past days, and they need to be ashamed of themselves. I'm going
to say low level. I don't think it is low level. The low level explosion of anti-Semitism in recent years. Kids being afraid of identifying as Jewish on the way to school, harassment of people on tubes, on buses. There's a video going around yesterday. No Jews on this tram. Things like that. Look, I mean, this is happening on a widespread basis now.
And a lot of this is being stimulated by hostile nation states. So the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps will be behind pushing a lot of the anti-Israeli and anti-Jewish sentiment, because they know that will be tying up political capital and dealing with things. Vladimir Putin in Russia will be going, hey, here's an easy way of taking some of the political capital away from what the West is focusing on by distracting them and other things. So is stirring it up. People say, oh no, there's no links like that. There are links like that. It's all linked together and pushing it, and therefore
that's not a conspiracy theory.
It's not a conspiracy theory. It is what they do, and they're very good. They're very good at it.
And also, genuinely, it just shows sort of dissent and disagreement and conflict within Western societies,
which is exactly what Vladimir Putin wants to do, because he then exploits that dissent even further, and it means that our security services aren't focusing on the threats that are coming from them. The Chinese love it as well. Our politicians are not focused on further support for Ukraine, because they're being tied up with these sorts of domestic issues. Keir Starmer was in Denmark talking about EU support for Ukraine and for elsewhere. He's not doing that now. He's coming back here to chair a COBRA meeting.
And it's interesting, especially that in Denmark, in Copenhagen, we've had drones disrupting, having to close the airport. We've seen this happening. Drones sort of just interfering in airports and things. And again, it's believed to be, the Russians are behind this.
The Russians behind it, and it's a growing threat. And it's all linked. And people who say, no, it's not, this is purely to do with the Palestinian people, just don't know what they're talking about. And this is why groups like Palestine Action get proscribed, because there is intelligence sitting behind it that says actually the people who are pulling the strings, the puppeteers, are these nation states.
And I was planning to talk a lot in this half hour about the people getting on boats to come here. What about Greta Thunberg and her little acolytes on that flotilla, the boats going to Gaza, they claim, who got boarded by the IDF, helped on with her jacket, no doubt given Yom Kippur and fasting, maybe not given a sandwich like she was last time. But there's argument that they've been taken hostage once again, seized by the Israeli forces. What do you make of that flotilla? It's run by Hamas. By the way, the people organising that flotilla are absolutely Hamas affiliated.
They're carrying out a legitimate protest. That's fine, but they're getting then to a point where they're going to put themselves at danger. They're going to put other security.
They were arguing, look, we're in international seas. The Israelis don't have the right to board our boats.
Well, I'd say they're protecting them from getting into a place where, when they land with their gaze against or or gay support for Hamas.
Queers for Palestine.
Queers for Palestine.
Yes.
That's the phrase I was looking for. Queers for Palestine. Something bad may happen to them. Reality may come in.
Well, a lot of people saying they should have been allowed to just let them dock in Gaza, because they say they're bringing aid, actually, but there's barely any aid. They've thrown some of it overboard anyway.
There's no aid.
But also,
in plastic bottles to float in.
But also, they've been offered every opportunity to take that. But, you can have the aid, you can take the aid in if you want to take the aid in. And by the way, we're talking drop in the ocean, quite literally.
And if they had gone on shore and anything had happened to them, oh my goodness, the criticism that would have then come out saying, well, nobody protected them. And all this. You can't win one way or the other. And the Israelis have gone in, quietly arrested a number of people. There's still some boats that are continuing further forward, but I think the Israelis will come back and deal with those. It was ever going to happen.
Do you think, just finally, that the deal, the peace deal, the 20-point plan accepted by Donald Trump, put by Donald Trump, accepted by Netanyahu, and indeed most Middle Eastern nations, European, the nations as well, do you think that Hamas will accept it?
No, Hamas don't want to accept it. Their leadership are still sitting there in their five-star. Well, those that remain in their five-star hotels.
But isn't Qatar putting pressure on them now? Qatar knows that they could be targeted.
Qatar is putting pressure on them, but again, those Hamas fighters on the ground know that they will have to disband completely and disappear, and they lose their little power base. They're little men with big rifles that have got power over the local communities. You take that rifle away from them, and those communities are going to turn on them.
OK, very interesting, Philip. And thank you very much indeed. Just a statement now from the Tory leader, Keir Starmer. We've had that statement about this suspected terror attack in Manchester outside a synagogue in North Manchester at Heaton Park. The Prime Minister has said that he is appalled by the attack. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, horrified. Keir Starmer says it looks like an outrageous attack on the Jewish community on their holiest day. Just breaking news for the Prime Minister said that additional police assets will be deployed at synagogues across the country after that suspected terror attack at a synagogue in Manchester. Speaking as he flew back to the UK from a summit in Denmark to chair an emergency COPA meeting, he says, we will do everything to keep our Jewish community safe. I've got to be honest with you, Prime Minister, I don't think you have done enough to keep our Jewish community safe. I think when you happily allow these pro-Palestinian marches on the streets, and the last government did too. I think it was a point when they were supportive of the Palestinian people and people in Gaza. They're just pro-Hamas marches. A lot of the people who organise them are very, very closely linked with the Hamas terrorists who launched the attack on October the 7th and still hold hostages right now, starved and beaten and tortured in tunnels under Gaza City and elsewhere. When so little's done, when pro-Palestinian activists are able to freely basically set off fireworks and act with impunity on our streets, as they did in London only last night. If you look at my social feed, you'll see I've just retweeted some images of that. Not a police officer inside. When a Jewish man, Gideon Volta, is told off for walking along on one of these pro-Palestinian marches against the route of traffic and being told he has to leave because he is openly Jewish. When children who go to schools that are Jewish schools are told, don't wear your blazer. We don't want anyone to know you're Jewish. When every synagogue in this country has to have a guard outside, more than one guard outside because of the fear of attacks. When people are routinely being harassed in the street, on social media, in public, on public transport. Sorry, it's too late. It's too late, Prime Minister. And when you recognise a Palestinian state, the cause that has been used to justify so much of the, not anti-Zionism, not pro-Palestinian, not anti-Israel, but anti-Semitic views and opinions and attacks on our streets, you gave them succor. You basically said, carry on, we'll give you the reward. That's what you did. This is on you. This is on you, Prime Minister. So don't you bloody dare say we'll put police outside synagogues. You're one of the reasons why there need to be police outside synagogues. Don't you bloody dare saying you want to keep the Jewish community safe in this country when you're part of the reason of why they are not. Shame on you. Shame on you.